Something that I've absolutely loved seeing in my lifetime is just the power of the worker finally getting its day in the media. Listen, I know there's been labor rights movements for centuries in countries all around the world, but I feel like with the interconnected nature of platforms like TikTok, with technologies, ideas are spreading faster than ever. When you suddenly have access to so many different people's lives because people are sharing so willingly on the internet, you start to see the disconnect. It's like when those school tours went viral, when people around the country started doing like, this is my high school, and people were like, wow, I never realized like how poor my community was after I saw these like rich white people living in these suburbs where they go to these giant high schools that are like little mansions. More and more, we're seeing the gross wealth inequality that is from the utter greed of the concentrated 0.001%. And finally, these movements are really gaining steam. And not only are people fighting for minimum wage, but we have the writers striking, we have actors striking, we have the postal people striking, we have government workers striking. I was reading a piece the other day about how workers in factories that are often exploited for their cheap labor overseas are seeing just unfair it is, how unfair conditions are, and they're seeing the publicizing of these huge labor rights movements around the world through platforms like TikTok and Twitter and all these things, and they're saying, you know what, I don't want to go work in this factory. I'm not going to work for this factory unless you pay me a fair wage. And now these factories are having to scramble because, these Westerners, people in these uber rich countries are used to exploiting that labor so they can get super cheap products. I was just reading about this in the Wall Street Journal the other day. There's going to be the end of super cheap goods because finally people are fighting back against these oppressive and exploitative wage systems. Now, systemic oppression and systemic discrimination exist in so many facets and is extremely complex. And I don't mean in any way to make it seem like the fight is over. Like there's so much work to do. But I think that something that's been just hugely encouraging in my lifetime is seeing people finally, just everyday people fighting back against these uber oppressive systems. I remember when I was a kid, it was still very normal for corporations to do unpaid internships in which they would literally extract your labor, expect you to transport yourself, not get paid a salary, not get paid anything, no perks at all, and still perform labor just so you could get a bump on your resume and hopefully work your way towards a paid job. And then through lots of mass protests, we're still having protests in the publishing houses for low pay, but we're seeing how that is on the way out. And now at least, people are getting wages for internships, and it's these incremental, progress points. But I think the overall point I just wanted to make is when I see even moments like this, I'm just you know what? It's so cool that this collective consciousness raising is happening. All power to the unions, all power to the worker power forever.